The economy of Japan is the third largest in the world by nominal GDP, the fourth largest by purchasing power parity, and is the world's second largest developed economy. According to the International Monetary Fund, the country's per capita GDP was at $36,899, the 22nd highest in 2013. Japan is a member of the G7. The Japanese economy is forecasted by the quarterly Tankan Survey of Business Sentiment conducted by the Bank of Japan. Nikkei 225 presents the monthly report of top blue-chip equities on Japan Exchange Group. Due to a volatile currency exchange rate, Japan's GDP as measured in dollars fluctuates widely. Accounting for these fluctuations through use of the Atlas method, Japan is estimated to have a GDP per capita of around $38,490. Japan is the world's third largest automobile manufacturing country, has the largest electronics goods industry, and is often ranked among the world's most innovative countries, leading several measures of global patent filings. Facing increasing competition from China and South Korea, manufacturing in Japan today now focuses primarily on high-tech and precision goods, such as optical instruments, hybrid vehicles, and robotics. Besides the Kanto region, the Kansai region is one of the leading industrial clusters and manufacturing centers for the Japanese economy. Japan is the world's largest creditor nation, generally running an annual trade surplus and having a considerable net international investment surplus. As of 2010, Japan possesses 13.7% of the world's private financial assets at an estimated $14.6 trillion. As of 2013, 62 of the Fortune Global 500 companies are based in Japan. Overview of economy. In the 3 decades of economic development following 1960, Japan ignored defense spending in favor of economic growth, thus allowing for a rapid economic growth referred to as the Japanese post-war economic miracle. By the guidance of Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, with average growth rates of 10% in the 1960s, 5% in the 1970s, and 4% in the 1980s. Japan was able to establish and maintain itself as the world's second largest economy from 1978 until 2010, when it was supplanted by the People's Republic of China. By 1990, income per capita in Japan equaled or surpassed that in most countries in the West. However, in the second half of the 1980s, rising stock and real estate prices caused the economic bubble to the Japanese economy by Bank of Japan. The economic bubble came to an abrupt end as the Tokyo Stock Exchange crashed in 1990–92 and real estate prices peaked in 1991. Growth in Japan throughout the 1990s at 1.5% was slower than growth in other major developed economies, giving rise to the term lost decade. Nonetheless, GDP per capita growth from 2001 to 2010 has still managed to outpace Europe and the United States. But Japan public debt remains a daunting task for the Japanese government due to excessive borrowing, social welfare spending with an aging society, and lack of economic, industrial growth in recent years to contribute to the tax revenue. The scenario of abandoned homes continues to spread from rural areas to urban areas in Japan. Japanese economy rebounded under Junichiro Koizumi by acting against bad debts with commercial banks and privatized the postal savings system. Abenomics has thus far given the economy of Japan an unsteady growth. The issue of export-oriented economy from the Japanese currency intervention causes the effect of improving export but reduces import due to weaker yen by the Japanese government. The ICT industry has generated the major outputs to the Japanese economy. Japan is the second largest music market in the world. Manga cafe business expands to 2,000 stores nationwide in Japan in 2002. With fewer children in the aging Japan, Japanese anime industry is facing growing Chinese competition in the targeted Chinese market. Japanese manga industry profession enjoys popularity in most of the Asian markets. Local gourmets of 47 prefectures of Japan are guided and promoted by Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries. Japan Cup in the Tokyo Racecourse is one of the richest horse racing in the world. A mountainous, volcanic island country, Japan has inadequate natural resources to support its growing economy and large population, and therefore exports goods in which it has a comparative advantage, such as engineering-oriented, research and development-led industrial products in exchange for the import of raw materials and petroleum. Japan is among the top 3 importers for agricultural products in the world, next to the European Union and United States in total volume for covering of its own domestic agricultural consumption. Japan is the world's largest single national importer of fish and fishery products. Tokyo Metropolitan Central Wholesale Market is the largest wholesale market for primary products in Japan, including the renowned Tsukiji fish market. Japanese whaling, ostensibly for research purposes, has been challenged as illegal under international law. Although many kinds of minerals were extracted throughout the country, most mineral resources had to be imported in the post-war era. Local deposits of metal-bearing ores were difficult to process because they were low-grade. The nation's large and varied forest resources, which covered 70% of the country in the late 1980s, were not utilized extensively because of political decisions on local, prefectural, and national levels. Japan decided not to exploit its forest resources for economic gain. Domestic sources only supplied between 25 and 30% of the nation's timber needs. Agriculture and fishing were the best developed resources, but only through years of painstaking investment and toil. The nation therefore built up the manufacturing and processing industries to convert raw materials imported from abroad. This strategy of economic development necessitated the establishment of a strong economic infrastructure to provide the needed energy, transportation, communications, and technological know-how. Deposits of gold, magnesium, and silver meet current industrial demands, but Japan is dependent on foreign sources for many of the minerals essential to modern industry. Iron ore, copper, bauxite, and alumina must be imported, as well as many forest products. Economic history. The economic history of Japan is one of the most studied economies for its spectacular growth in 3 different periods. First was the foundation of Edo to whole inland economical developments. Second was the Meiji Restoration to be the first non-European power. Third was after the defeat of World War II, when the island nation rose to become the world's second largest economy. First contacts with Europe. Japan was considered as a country rich in precious metals, mainly owing to Marco Polo's accounts of gilded temples and palaces, but also due to the relative abundance of surface ores characteristic of a massive, huge volcanic country. Before large-scale deep mining became possible in industrial times, Japan was to become a major exporter of silver, copper, and gold during the period until exports for those minerals were banned. Renaissance Japan was also perceived as a sophisticated feudal society with a high culture and a strong pre-industrial technology. It was densely populated and urbanized. Prominent European observers of the time seemed to agree that the Japanese excel not only all the other Oriental peoples, they surpassed the Europeans as well. Early European visitors were amazed by the quality of Japanese craftsmanship and metalsmithing. This stems from the fact that Japan itself is rather poor in natural resources found commonly in Europe, especially iron. Thus, the Japanese were famously frugal with their consumable resources. What little they had they used with expert skill. The cargo of the first Portuguese ships arriving in Japan almost entirely consisted of Chinese goods. The Japanese were very much looking forward to acquiring such goods, but had been prohibited from any contacts with the Emperor of China, as a punishment for Waco pirate raids. The Portuguese therefore found the opportunity to act as intermediaries in Asian trade. Edo period. The beginning of the Edo period coincides with the last decades of the Nunban trade period, during which intense interaction with European powers, on the economic and religious plane, took place. It is at the beginning of the Edo period that Japan built her first ocean-going Western-style warships, such as the San Juan Bautista, a 500-ton galleon-type ship that transported a Japanese embassy headed by Hasekura Tsunenaga to the Americas, which then continued to Europe. Also during that period, the Bakufu commissioned around 350 Red Seal ships, 3-masted and armed trade ships, for intra-Asian commerce. Japanese adventurers, such as Yamada Nagamasa, were active throughout Asia. In order to eradicate the influence of Christianization, Japan entered in a period of isolation called Sakoku, during which its economy enjoyed stability and mild progress. Economic development during the Edo period included urbanization, increased shipping of commodities, a significant expansion of domestic and, initially, foreign commerce, and a diffusion of trade and handicraft industries. The construction trades flourished, along with banking facilities and merchant associations. Increasingly, Han authorities oversaw the rising agricultural production and the spread of rural handicrafts. By the mid-18th century, Edo had a population of more than 1 million and Osaka and Kyoto each had more than 400,000 inhabitants. Many other castle towns grew, as well. Osaka and Kyoto became busy trading and handicraft production centers, while Edo was the center for the supply of food and essential urban consumer goods. Rice was the base of the economy, as the daimyo collected the taxes from the peasants in the form of rice. Taxes were high, about 40% of the harvest. The rice was sold at the Fudazashi market in Edo. To raise money, the daimyo used forward contracts to sell rice that was not even harvested yet. These contracts were similar to modern futures trading. During the period, Japan progressively studied Western sciences and techniques through the information and books received through the Dutch traders in Dejima. The main areas that were studied included geography, medicine, natural sciences, astronomy, art, languages, physical sciences such as the study of electrical phenomena, and mechanical sciences as exemplified by the development of Japanese clockwatches, or wadoke, inspired from Western techniques. Pre-war period. Since the mid-19th century, after the Meiji Restoration, the country was opened up to Western commerce and influence, and Japan has gone through two periods of economic development. The first began in earnest in 1868 and extended through to World War II. The second began in 1945 and continued into the mid-1980s. Economic developments of the pre-war period began with the rich state and strong army policy by the Meiji government. During the Meiji period, leaders inaugurated a new Western-based education system for all young people, sent thousands of students to the United States and Europe, and hired more than 3,000 Westerners to teach modern science, mathematics, technology, and foreign languages in Japan. The government also built railroads, improved road, and inaugurated a land reform program to prepare the country for further development. To promote industrialization, the government decided that, while it should help private business to allocate resources and to plan, the public sector was best equipped to stimulate economic growth. The greatest role of government was to help provide good economic conditions for business. In short, government was to be the guide and business the producer. In the early Meiji period, the government built factories and shipyards that were sold to entrepreneurs at a fraction of their value. Many of these businesses grew rapidly into the larger conglomerates. Government emerged as chief promoter of private enterprise, enacting a series of pro-business policies. In the mid-1930s, the Japanese nominal wage rates were 10 times less than the one of the US. while the price level is estimated to have been about 44% the one of the U.S. post-war period from the 1960s to the 1980s. Overall real economic growth was extremely large. A 10% average in the 1960s, a 5% average in the 1970s and 4% average in the 1980s. By the end of said period, Japan had moved into being a high-wage economy. Growth slowed markedly in the late 1990s, also termed the lost decade after the collapse of the Japanese asset price bubble. As a consequence, Japan ran massive budget deficits to finance large public works programs. By 1998, Japan's public works projects still could not stimulate demand enough to end the economy's stagnation. In desperation, the Japanese government undertook structural reform policies intended to wring speculative excesses from the stock and real estate markets. Unfortunately, these policies led Japan into deflation on numerous occasions between 1999 and 2004. In his 1998 paper, Japan's Trap, Princeton economics professor Paul Krugman argued that, based on a number of models, Japan had a new option. Krugman's plan called for a rise in inflation expectations to, in effect, cut long-term interest rates and promote spending. Japan used another technique, somewhat based on Krugman's, called quantitative easing. As opposed to flooding the money supply with newly printed money, the Bank of Japan expanded the money supply internally to raise expectations of inflation. Initially, the policy failed to induce any growth, but it eventually began to affect inflationary expectations. By late 2005, the economy finally began what seems to be a sustained recovery. GDP growth for that year was 2.8%, with an annualized fourth-quarter expansion of 5.5%, surpassing the growth rates of the US and European Union during the same period. Unlike previous recovery trends, domestic consumption has been the dominant factor of growth. This led some economists, such as Paul Krugman, and some Japanese politicians, to advocate the generation of higher inflation expectations. In July 2006, the zero-rate policy was ended. In 2008, the Japanese central bank still has the lowest interest rates in the developed world. Deflation has still not been eliminated, and the Nikkei 225 has fallen over approximately 50%. However, on April 5, 2013, the Bank of Japan announced that it would be purchasing 60–70 trillion yen in bonds and securities in an attempt to eliminate deflation by doubling the money supply in Japan over the course of 2 years. Markets around the world have responded positively to the government's current proactive policies, with the Nikkei 225 adding more than 42% since November 2012. The Economist has suggested that improvements to bankruptcy law, land transfer law, and tax laws will aid Japan's economy. In recent years, Japan has been the top export market for almost 15 trading nations worldwide. Infrastructure. In 2005, 1/2 of Japan's energy was produced from petroleum, 1/5 from coal, and 14% from natural gas. Nuclear power in Japan made 1/4 of electricity production, but due to the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster, there has been a large desire to end Japan's nuclear power program. In September 2013, Japan closed its last 50 nuclear power plants nationwide, causing the nation to be nuclear-free. Japan's spending on roads has been considered large. The 1.2 million kilometers of paved road are one of the major means of transportation. Japan has left-hand traffic. A single network of speed-divided, limited-access toll roads connects major cities and are operated by toll-collecting enterprises. New and used cars are inexpensive, and the Japanese government has encouraged people to buy hybrid vehicles. Car ownership fees and fuel levies are used to promote energy efficiency. Rail transport is a major means of transport in Japan. Dozens of Japanese railway companies compete in regional and local passenger transportation markets. For instance, 6 passenger junior enterprises, Kintetsu Corporation, Saiba Railway, and Kaya Corporation. Often, strategies of these enterprises contain real estate or department stores next to stations, and many major stations have major department stores near them. The Japanese cities of Fukuoka, Kobe, Kyoto, Nagoya, Osaka, Sapporo, Sendai, Tokyo and Yokohama all have subway systems. Some 250 high-speed Shinkansen trains connect major cities. All trains are known for punctuality, and if delay of 90 seconds can be considered late for some train services. There are 98 passenger and 175 total airports in Japan, and flying is a popular way to travel. The largest domestic airport, Tokyo International Airport, is Asia's second busiest airport. The largest international gateways are Narita International Airport, Kansai International Airport, and Chiba Centre International Airport. The largest ports in Japan include Nagoya Port, the Port of Yokohama, the Port of Tokyo and the Port of Kobe. About 84% of Japan's energy is imported from other countries. Japan is the world's largest liquefied natural gas importer, second largest coal importer, and third largest net oil importer. Given its heavy dependence on imported energy, Japan has aimed to diversify its sources. Since the oil shocks of the 1970s, Japan has reduced dependence on petroleum as a source of energy from 77.4% in 1973 to about 43.7% in 2010 and increased dependence on natural gas and nuclear power. Other important energy source includes coal and hydroelectricity as Japan's biggest renewable energy source. Japan's solar market is also currently booming. Kerosene is also used extensively for home heating in portable heaters, especially farther north. Many taxi companies run their fleets on liquefied natural gas. A recent success towards greater fuel economy was the introduction of mass-produced hybrid vehicles. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, who was working on Japan's economic revival, signed a treaty with Saudi Arabia and UAE about the rising prices of oil, ensuring Japan's stable deliveries from that region. Macroeconomic Trend. This is a chart of trend of gross domestic product of Japan at market prices estimated by the International Monetary Fund with figures in millions of Japanese yen. See also for purchasing power parity comparisons. The US dollar was exchanged at 109 in 2010. GDP composition. Industries by GDP value added 2012. Values are converted using the exchange rate on April 13, 2013.